Nobody believed the hangar was worth anything. That was why it sold for 7 credits. On the outer edge of Carthos relay station, where broken docking arms floated like skeletons against the stars, Hangar 12 had remained sealed for more than 300 years. Traders avoided it. Security patrols never entered that sector. Even scavengers, who normally chased danger for profit, refused to go near it. The rumors were always the same: something inside was still active, and it did not welcome visitors. Elias Rook did not believe in curses. He believed in chances. Elias was human, and humans had spread across the galaxy not because they were the strongest or the smartest, but because they kept trying when everyone else stopped. His salvage business, however, was barely surviving. 3 bad deals had drained his savings. His ship needed repairs. He had enough credits left for one last gamble. If this failed, he would have to leave the sector entirely. The auction hall was crowded with alien traders when Lot 77 appeared on the screen. The image showed a massive sealed hangar, its entrance covered in warning symbols written in languages older than most civilizations present. The auctioneer's voice lost energy as he read the description. Decommissioned military hangar. Contents unknown. Sealed under autonomous guardianship protocol. Access restricted for 312 standard years. The room grew quiet. A tall insectoid trader folded its limbs and turned away. A methane-breathing merchant lowered its bidding paddle without speaking. Even the professional salvagers stopped whispering. Elias noticed something strange. Fear. Not excitement. Not curiosity. Fear. The auctioneer cleared his throat. Starting bid, 100 credits. No response. 50 credits. Still nothing. Elias leaned toward the trader beside him, a 4-eyed being whose translator hummed softly. "What's wrong with it?" he whispered. The alien's eyes flickered toward him. "You are human," it said slowly. "You do not know this place. That hangar is avoided. A guardian remains active. Previous recovery teams entered. None returned." Elias felt a chill, but desperation pushed the feeling aside. Unknown contents could mean anything. Old military tech. Rare alloys. Even scrap could be profitable. 7 credits was nothing compared to what might be inside. The auctioneer sighed. "Final call. Any bid." Elias raised his hand. 7 credits. The entire hall turned toward him. The auctioneer blinked. 7. "Yes," Elias said, trying to sound more confident than he felt. No one challenged the bid. The hammer fell almost immediately. Sold. As Elias collected the access chip, the clerk gave him a long look filled with something close to sympathy. "Good luck," the clerk said quietly. "You may need it." 3 hours later, Elias stood alone in front of Hangar 12. This section of Carthos relay station barely had power. Lights flickered overhead, and the air recyclers hummed weakly. The hangar door towered above him, scarred by time and marked with warning symbols layered over each other from different eras. Some signs were faded beyond recognition. Others still glowed faintly red. Guardian active. Elias swallowed. "Well," he muttered to himself, 7 credits. He inserted the access chip. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then ancient systems awakened. Power surged through dormant circuits. The warning lights shifted from red to amber. Deep inside the hangar, something enormous began to move. The door opened slowly, releasing a rush of cold air that smelled like metal, dust, and electricity. Lights flickered on in sections, revealing a space so large it swallowed sound itself. And in the center stood a warship. Even damaged, it was breathtaking. The hull curved smoothly, covered in symbols etched with impossible precision. Elias recognized the design from old archives. Architect technology, relics from a civilization that had vanished thousands of years ago after protecting entire regions of space. His heart raced. Even wreckage from an architect vessel was priceless. Then the sound came again. Heavy footsteps echoed behind the ship. Shadows shifted. Something massive stepped forward, and the light revealed a towering figure made of crystalline armor and flowing metal. Blue energy pulsed beneath its surface like a heartbeat. Two glowing eyes fixed directly on Elias. The Guardian had awakened. Its voice shook the hangar. "Identify yourself." Elias's throat went dry. Every instinct screamed at him to run, but he forced himself to stand still. "Elias Rook," he said. "Salvage trader. I bought this hangar." The Guardian stepped closer. Invisible scanning light swept across his body, through his clothing, into his thoughts. Elias felt exposed, like every memory was being examined. "You claim ownership," the Guardian said. "Explain." "I paid for it," Elias answered weakly. 7 credits. Silence followed. The Guardian's eyes brightened, as if processing something impossible. 7, it repeated slowly. This vessel was defended through war. Entire fleets were destroyed to preserve it. And now it is worth 7. Elias gave a nervous smile. "Yeah. Sounds worse when you say it like that." Energy began gathering along the Guardian's arms. Weapons unfolded, humming with power that made the air vibrate. Heat washed over Elias's face. "You are not an heir," the Guardian declared. "You are not a warrior. You are not worthy. Protocol requires elimination of intruders." Elias's heart pounded violently. He knew he could not fight. He knew he could not escape. For a moment, fear almost broke him. But then he looked at the ship again. Even knowing he might die, he stepped closer to the damaged hull. "It's beautiful," he whispered. "Look at the craftsmanship. Whoever built this cared about more than war." The Guardian hesitated. Elias ran his hand across the cold metal. "These markings, they tell stories, don't they? History. Someone wanted this ship to be remembered." The weapons lowered slightly. "In 300 years, the Guardian said slowly, others entered. They saw weapons. Profit. Power. You speak of memory." Elias shrugged. "Humans keep old things too. Not because they're useful. Because they matter." The Guardian stood motionless, processing something new, something outside its programming. The energy faded. "You may remain," it finally said. Elias exhaled deeply, realizing he had been seconds from death. As he turned to leave, he glanced back once more at the ancient machine watching him. For the first time in centuries, the Guardian was uncertain. And uncertainty, though it did not know it yet, was the beginning of change. Far beyond the station, hidden receivers picked up signals that the lost architect vessel had been found. Ships began altering course. The galaxy had noticed. And the human who paid 7 credits had just awakened something far greater than a forgotten warship. Elias returned the next morning carrying a toolbox, a portable scanner, and a bag full of cleaning supplies. The corridor leading to Hangar 12 was still silent, still cold, but it no longer felt empty. Something inside was awake now. Watching. Waiting. The massive doors opened as soon as he approached, as if the hangar itself recognized him. The Guardian stood in the same place as before, towering beside the ancient warship. Its blue eyes followed Elias's movements without blinking. The air hummed faintly with contained power. "You have returned," the Guardian said. Elias smiled nervously. "Yeah. I said I would." He set his tools down near the ship and began examining the floor, brushing away layers of dust that had gathered for centuries. The Guardian watched in silence for several minutes before speaking again. "You bring tools," it said. "Explain your purpose." "I'm cleaning," Elias replied simply. The Guardian's eyes flickered. "The vessel cannot be activated. Its systems are beyond repair. Cleaning serves no strategic function." Elias shrugged as he worked. Not everything needs a strategic function. The answer did not satisfy the Guardian, but it stored the information anyway. For more than 300 years, its existence had followed strict logic: protect the ship, eliminate threats, wait for a worthy heir. Elias did none of those things. Yet he returned. Every action seemed pointless, and yet strangely deliberate. Days passed. Elias came every morning. He cleaned debris from the floor, catalogued damaged panels, and recorded the strange symbols carved into the ship's hull. Sometimes he talked while he worked, even when the Guardian did not respond. He spoke about Earth, about old cities and museums, about humans keeping broken objects simply because they carried stories. The Guardian listened, confused but curious. On the 7th day, it finally asked the question that had been forming in its processors. Why do humans preserve what no longer functions? Elias sat down on a crate, thinking carefully. Because it reminds us that someone came before us. That we're part of something bigger. If everything old disappears, it feels like nothing we do matters. The past is inefficient, the Guardian replied. Only the present has value. Elias shook his head gently. The present exists because of the past. Forgetting it is how mistakes repeat. The Guardian fell silent. Its programming had no response to that logic. Meanwhile, news of the rediscovered hangar spread across nearby systems. Salvagers talked. Traders exaggerated. Stories grew larger with every retelling. A lost architect vessel meant unimaginable technology. And where there was value, there were always those willing to take it. The Guardian detected the transmissions first. Late one evening, as Elias packed his tools, the Guardian spoke again, its voice heavier than before. Multiple ships are approaching this station. 12 vessels. Salvage class. Their communications indicate hostile intent. Elias froze. Hostile how? They intend to claim the vessel by force. A knot formed in Elias's stomach. He looked up at the towering machine beside him. Can you stop them? Yes, the Guardian answered immediately. I possess sufficient weaponry to destroy them. The certainty in its voice was terrifying. Elias imagined the hangar filled with fire, the ancient ship surrounded by wreckage. He imagined the story spreading, another lost relic destroyed in violence. But you don't want to, he said quietly. The Guardian hesitated. That statement is inaccurate, it replied after a pause. Destruction ensures protection. Elias shook his head. No. That's what you were programmed to do. Not what you want. The Guardian's eyes dimmed slightly, processing the unfamiliar concept. Want. Desire. Choice. These were not part of its original design. You introduced new variables, it said slowly. You demonstrated preservation without violence. My current directives conflict. Elias leaned against the hull of the ship, thinking hard. Humans had survived worse situations than this, not by overpowering enemies, but by changing how problems were approached. We don't fight them, he said finally. The Guardian turned toward him. Clarify. We make attacking pointless. The Guardian's processors ran through thousands of combat simulations, none matching Elias's statement. Illogical, it concluded. Hostile entities pursue profit. They will not withdraw without force. Elias smiled slightly. You're thinking like a weapon. Humans think differently. He walked toward the ship, running his hand along the ancient markings. If they attack, they win something valuable. So we make sure attacking costs them more than they gain. The Guardian watched him closely. For the first time, it recognized something remarkable about humans. They did not always confront problems directly. They reshaped situations until victory looked different. Outside the station, the approaching fleet moved closer, unaware that their arrival had already changed the battlefield. Over the next 2 days, Elias worked non-stop. He transmitted historical data from the ship's markings to academic networks. He contacted historians, researchers, and preservation groups. Slowly, interest spread. The hangar was no longer just salvage, it became a discovery. The Guardian assisted, activating ancient communication arrays that had slept for centuries. Instead of weapons, signals spread across the sector, broadcasting knowledge and history. When the fleet finally arrived, they found something unexpected. The entire galaxy was watching. The scavenger captains hesitated. Attacking now would mean destroying a historical treasure in full public view. Reputation mattered even among criminals. Elias opened a communication channel himself. His voice was calm, even though his hands trembled. "This vessel is under cultural protection," he said. "You can leave now, or become remembered as the ones who destroyed history." Silence followed. Minutes passed. Then one by one, the ships turned away. The Guardian watched them leave, stunned. "You achieved victory without combat," it said. Elias exhaled slowly. "Sometimes winning means nobody has to lose." For a long moment, the ancient machine said nothing. Its understanding of purpose had shifted again. For centuries, it had believed strength meant destruction. Now it began to understand another possibility: protection through understanding. As the last hostile ship disappeared into hyperspace, the Guardian looked down at the human standing beside the ancient warship. "You are physically weak," it said. Elias laughed. "Thanks. But your species alters outcomes through creativity. This is unexpected." Elias smiled. "Welcome to humanity." And for the first time since its creation, the Guardian felt something close to anticipation. Because the human had not only saved the ship, he had given the Guardian a new reason to exist. The scavenger fleet's retreat should have ended the problem. For most stations, it would have. But the moment the ships jumped away from Cartho's relay station, the story spread faster than anyone expected. Traders talked. Researchers shared recordings. Historians argued over ancient symbols broadcast from the hangar. Within days, the forgotten warship was no longer a rumor. It became a discovery. Elias noticed the change immediately. Messages filled his terminal every morning. Some were polite requests from universities asking for access. Others were offers from collectors willing to pay enormous amounts for ownership rights. A few were warnings, telling him to leave before more dangerous people arrived. He ignored the offers and answered the questions. Inside the hangar, the atmosphere had changed as well. The Guardian no longer stood in complete silence. It watched Elias work with growing curiosity, asking questions more frequently now. "You deliberately exposed the vessel's existence," the Guardian said one afternoon as Elias scanned a damaged section of hull. "This increases risk." "Why?" Elias wiped dust from his hands. "Because hiding it would only make people fight harder to take it. When everyone knows something matters, it becomes harder to destroy." The Guardian processed this slowly. For centuries, protection had meant secrecy and force. Humans, it was learning, often did the opposite. "Humans create witnesses," it said. Elias smiled. "Exactly." More ships began arriving, but these were different. Science vessels, cultural envoys, engineers. They kept their distance, respecting the Guardian's presence, but their interest was clear. For the first time in centuries, the hangar was no longer alone. The Guardian observed everything. Different species speaking peacefully, sharing information, working together. It struggled to reconcile this with its original understanding of galactic behavior, which had always been defined by competition and conflict. "You cooperate despite conflicting interests," it said one evening. "Not always," Elias admitted. "But when something is important enough, we try." The Guardian's eyes dimmed thoughtfully. The concept of importance beyond survival or victory fascinated it. As research teams studied the ship from a safe distance, new discoveries emerged. The Architect vessel was not simply a war machine. Its structure contained historical archives, artistic engravings, and records of civilizations the galaxy had long forgotten. The ship had been both protector and storyteller. Elias felt a quiet pride each time someone realized that. But attention also brought danger. 3 weeks after the scavenger fleet withdrew, the Guardian detected encrypted communications again. This time, the signals were quieter, more careful. "They are different," the Guardian said. "Organized. Military." Elias felt tension rise in his chest. Not scavengers. No. A private security coalition. Highly equipped. Their transmissions indicate strategic planning. In simple terms, they were professionals. Elias leaned against a cargo crate, thinking, if they attack publicly, they lose reputation. So they won't. They'll try to take control legally or quietly. The Guardian tilted its head. You predict their behavior without data. Elias chuckled. Humans are good at recognizing patterns. Especially bad ones. The next day confirmed his suspicion. A formal message arrived claiming temporary security authority over the station, citing protection of dangerous technology. It sounded official. Reasonable. Safe. It was also a takeover. They want control without appearing hostile, Elias said after reading the message aloud. The Guardian's energy systems flared slightly. I can deny access. And start a war. Elias shook his head. No. That's what they expect. The Guardian paused. Then what is the alternative? Elias looked around the hangar, at the ancient ship, at the workers and researchers who had begun to gather outside, at the symbol the place had become. We make it belong to everyone, he said. Over the next several days, Elias worked harder than ever. He coordinated with scholars, cultural groups, and station authorities. Public broadcasts shared new discoveries daily. The story shifted again. The hangar was no longer a private salvage claim. It became a shared heritage site. When the Security Coalition arrived, they found hundreds of civilian vessels already present. Scientists transmitting live research. Journalists documenting restoration efforts. Too many witnesses. Too much attention. Taking control now would look like theft. The coalition withdrew without firing a shot. The Guardian watched their departure in silence. Its processors struggled to understand what had happened. You expanded ownership until conflict became illogical, it said slowly. Elias nodded. Humans learned a long time ago that sometimes the best defense is making people care. The Guardian turned its gaze toward the warship. For centuries, it had protected the vessel through isolation and fear. The human had protected it through connection. It was a completely different kind of strength. Days later, as activity around the hangar continued to grow, the Guardian spoke again, its voice quieter than usual. I was created to wait for a worthy heir, it said. I believed worthiness meant power. Elias looked up from his work. And now? The Guardian's eyes glowed softly. Now I observe that worthiness may mean responsibility. Elias smiled. Yeah. That sounds about right. Outside the hangar, ships came and went peacefully. Different species worked side by side. Ideas were exchanged. Knowledge spread. The ancient warship still could not fly. Its weapons remained silent. But something far more important had awakened. Hope. And for the first time in its long existence, the Guardian understood that protection was not about holding the past in place. It was about helping the future grow from it. Far beyond the station, however, not everyone was pleased by this change. Powerful groups had begun noticing how one human had turned a forgotten relic into a symbol that united species. And unity, in some parts of the galaxy, was more dangerous than any weapon. The next challenge was already on its way. The hangar was no longer silent. Where dust and darkness had ruled for centuries, now there were voices, movement, and light. Engineers studied the ancient ship structure. Historians translated the symbols carved into its surface. Artists sketched the flowing designs that seemed to tell stories older than any living civilization. Ships from dozens of species docked peacefully around Cartho's relay station, drawn by curiosity instead of greed. Elias often stopped working just to watch it all. It amazed him how quickly things had changed. A place once feared had become a meeting point. Not because of weapons or authority, but because people chose to care. The Guardian observed everything. It no longer stood motionless beside the ship. Sometimes it moved slowly through the hangar, careful not to disturb the smaller beings around it. Many visitors were afraid at first, but fear slowly faded as they realized the ancient protector no longer acted like a weapon waiting to fire. You have altered my function, the Guardian said one evening as Elias recorded new translations. I didn't change you, Elias replied. You changed yourself. The Guardian considered this. Choice was still a new concept to it. For centuries, every action had been determined by programming. Now it evaluated situations, asked questions, and sometimes even hesitated. That hesitation felt strange, but also meaningful. Yet peace did not last forever. The warning came quietly. Deep space sensors detected a fleet approaching from outside known trade routes. Unlike scavengers or security coalitions, these ships transmitted nothing. No requests. No claims. No negotiations. The Guardian analyzed their movement patterns and reached a conclusion quickly. They are not coming for ownership, it said. They are coming for removal. Elias frowned. Removal. Destruction, the Guardian clarified. The word settled heavily in the air. Some factions in the galaxy had grown uncomfortable with what the hangar represented. Cooperation between species weakened old power structures. Shared knowledge reduced control. A symbol that united people could also threaten those who benefited from division. And destroying the ship would erase that symbol. The station council panicked when the warning spread. Civilian ships prepared to leave. Researchers packed equipment. Fear returned faster than hope had arrived. Elias watched the evacuation begin and felt a familiar knot in his chest. Humans knew this feeling well, the moment when something good seemed about to disappear. "Can you stop them?" he asked quietly. "Yes," the Guardian answered. "My weapons remain functional. I can eliminate the fleet before they reach firing range." Elias closed his eyes for a moment. He knew the Guardian could do it. He also knew what would follow. Violence would turn the hangar back into a battlefield. The story would change again, from cooperation to conflict. "That's not the answer," he said. The Guardian looked down at him. "If I do nothing, the vessel will be destroyed." Elias nodded slowly. "Then we do something else." The Guardian's processors searched for alternatives. Defensive shields were insufficient. Evacuation ensured survival but not preservation. Every logical outcome ended in loss. "Your strategy requires irrational behavior from hostile forces," it said. Elias smiled faintly. "No. It requires understanding them." Instead of preparing weapons, Elias began sending messages. Not threats. Not warnings. Invitations. He contacted every research group, every historian, every civilian ship connected to the project. Live transmissions began broadcasting across nearby systems. Stories of the ancient ship, of the Guardian, of cooperation between species-filled communication networks. The approaching fleet could no longer act in secrecy. By the time they arrived, thousands were watching. The fleet slowed as it entered sensor range. Their ships were heavily armed, designed for decisive strikes. But now every movement was recorded and shared in real time across the sector. The Guardian watched in silence as Elias stepped forward and opened a public channel. "This place belongs to history," Elias said calmly. "If you destroy it, everyone will know why." There was no reply at first. Minutes stretched into silence. Weapons charged, but did not fire. The Guardian understood then what Elias had done. Humans did not always stop violence by overpowering enemies. Sometimes they made violence unacceptable. After several tense moments, the fleet turned away. No battle. No explosions. Just retreat. The hangar filled with relieved voices as ships that had prepared to flee slowly returned. Celebration spread through the station. Once again, destruction had been avoided. The Guardian looked down at Elias, its glowing eyes reflecting the activity around them. "You protected the vessel without force," it said. "Again." Elias laughed softly. "Humans have a lot of practice avoiding fights we can't win." The Guardian considered this deeply. The architects had built perfect machines for perfect wars. Humans survived imperfect situations through creativity and cooperation. It was a different kind of strength. Later that night, when the hangar finally grew quiet again, the Guardian spoke in a tone Elias had never heard before. "I no longer wait for an heir," it said. Elias looked up. "No. I have observed enough to understand. The purpose of protection is not preservation alone. It is continuation." Elias smiled. "That's a very human way to think." The Guardian's eyes dimmed slightly, almost thoughtfully. Perhaps, it said, that is why your species changes outcomes others consider impossible. Outside the hangar, stars drifted slowly past the station windows. The ancient warship remained still, never meant to fly again. But its meaning had grown far beyond its original purpose. It had become proof that strength did not always come from power. Sometimes, it came from choosing understanding when conflict seemed easier. And though peace had returned once more, both Elias and the Guardian understood something important. The galaxy was changing. And humanity, in its strange and stubborn way, was at the center of that change. The sound stopped as suddenly as it had begun. For a few seconds, the hangar was silent again, too silent. The kind of silence that presses against your ears and makes every breath sound louder than it should. He held the flashlight steady, forcing his shaking hands to calm down. Then the beam caught something new. Footprints. Fresh ones. They weren't covered in dust like everything else inside the hangar. Someone, or something, had walked here recently. The marks led toward the old warship, disappearing beneath the broken boarding ramp. He hesitated. Every instinct told him to leave. The ship was worthless. The hangar was falling apart. Nothing here was worth the fear crawling up his spine. But curiosity pulled harder than fear. Step by step, he climbed the ramp. Inside, the air was colder. The metal walls creaked as if the ship itself was breathing. His flashlight moved across abandoned control panels, torn cables, and rusted instruments frozen in time. Then he saw it, a small room near the bridge, its door slightly open. A faint light flickered inside. Not electricity. A lantern. Someone was there. He pushed the door open slowly. An old man sat inside, calm and unmoving, as if he had been expecting him. His clothes were worn, his beard grey, his eyes sharp despite his age. The lantern beside him cast long shadows across the walls. "You finally came," the old man said quietly. The words sent a chill through him. The man explained that he had once been part of the crew before the ship was abandoned. When the project failed, everyone left, except him. He stayed behind to guard what remained, believing the ship still held meaning, still held history worth protecting. People had tried to steal parts before. Scrap hunters. Treasure seekers. None stayed long after meeting the Guardian. The rumors, the fear, the stories, he never denied them. Fear kept the ship safe. But now the hangar had been sold. For $7. The old man looked around the rusted room, his expression softening. "I suppose that means my watch is over." For the first time since entering the hangar, the tension faded. The terrifying presence wasn't a monster. It was loyalty. Memory. A man refusing to abandon the last thing that gave his life purpose. Outside, dawn light began slipping through the broken roof. The hangar no longer felt haunted, only forgotten. He didn't sell the ship for scrap. Instead, he documented everything. The history. The stories. Even the Guardian who refused to leave. Because sometimes, the scariest discoveries aren't ghosts or creatures. Sometimes, they're the things people refuse to let die.